All right, so we are in Genesis chapter 25 this morning. Last week we went through 24, and a reminder as we're going through this, we're kind of doing an overview. So if you've gone through Genesis before, it could take a long time. There's over 50 chapters in it, and so it's going to take over a year to go even just one chapter at a time. But been trying to do a bigger overview, going through it, trying to do about a chapter each time. Sometimes it's taken us 2 or 3 Sundays, 2 or 3 mornings to go through a chapter. But last week we went through all chapter 24, and so that was looking for a bride for Isaac. So previously we had Sarah, Isaac's mother, die, and there's time of mourning. And then now Abraham, as he realizes he's getting older, he needs to find a bride for his son, right? His son of promise, of Isaac. And from previous sermons and going through the text, we know that it was very important that he was wanting Isaac to remain a distinct people. Okay, that promise that God had given to Abraham that was going to go through Isaac, they could not just intermix with the people there, and so he sent back a servant to get a bride for Isaac from the land that he came up. But at the same time, he couldn't send Isaac back to do it because he didn't want Isaac to stay in the land of their fathers that God had called Abraham and Sarah out of. And so, miraculously, an angel went ahead like Abraham had told his servant and had prepared the way, and there was Rebecca coming down, just like the servant had asked, God, if this mission is to be successful, please, the girl that comes down, that she would be the one, and to confirm this, that, she would offer me water when I asked, and without me asking, she would feed my camels, and that is exactly what happened. So went through that process, got to meet her brother Laban, and ended up bringing back a bride for Isaac. Right? Happily ever after. And in that, one of the applications, just the importance of parents in being involved in finding spouses for their children. And that kind of modern day, it's like, no, they just need to find it on their own. But to find a good, godly spouse for your Christian children is very important to be involved in that process. Okay, maybe you're not sending a servant to the land of your fathers to find somebody. It's not going to look exactly like this, but there needs to be more involvement than is usually given. And so kind of had like a happily ever after, if we would just ended chapter 24. They're in love, and he's comforted after his mom's death, and took Rebecca, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death, is the end of chapter 24. So chapter 25, let's go ahead and we're going to read through. In chapter 25, we have some overview. A lot of Genesis is skipping. It's not a comprehensive timeline of everything. You'll have some events and more details in certain areas, and then you'll skip around. Sometimes you'll jump hundreds of years into the future. Sometimes you jump 10 years, as we had with Abraham and Sarah. And then you'll have, it seems like, okay, bam, 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 we have all these events. And now we're jumping ahead, and we're looking at overview of some things that happened after Sarah's death and after Rebecca became Isaac's wife. So verse 1, chapter 25. Abraham again took a wife, and her name was Keturah. And she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Ashurim, Letushim, and Lemuim. And the sons of Midian were Ephah, Epher, Hanok, Abidah, and Eldah. All these were the children of Keturah. So we have a little bit of a genealogy, and sometimes we forget about this when we think of the overview of Scripture. But after Sarah died, what did Abraham do? He remarried. We're like, that was his there. Like, how could he just do that? And but he remarried. He took a wife. So it seems like he got Isaac set up. That was his primary concern for the son of promise of him and Sarah's son. Gets him set up with a bride, and then looks like a few years probably went by, and then we have he's an old man. How old is he at this point? How old was he when Sarah died? You remember? Sarah died at 127. Abraham was how much older? 10 years. Okay, so Abraham would be 137, and he's getting remarried at some point and having children. Okay, so we have overview. This is not time. We're not given how much years spacing, and we'll cover that. We'll talk about more of the dates, but at this point, from the time that Sarah died, do you know how much longer Abraham lived before he died? He lived about 38 years after Sarah died. Okay, that's longer than how old their son was when she died, right? Isaac was about 37 when Sarah died, and Abraham lives 38 more years after that. So Esau has a good chunk of life, right? So that's how he could have all those other kids with this Keturah lady. Okay, and with those descendants, we have some names. Some seem familiar. Trying to look up, there's not a lot of Medan kind of looks like the Medes and the Persians, but there's not really a connection there, it seems like, not that we know of. The main one, well, I guess there's another one, the Shua, Ishbak and Shua. Shua might be the ancestor of one of Job's friends, the Shuaite. There's some linguistic connections, but we're not told. It's just speculation if he is. But the connection that we do know from these descendants is, Midian, the Midianites, okay? So the promise that God would make Abraham into many nations, we already had Ishmael, right? He's made into a nation, right? Many of the Arab people today are from him. And he had 12 sons that were 12 princes. And then we have Isaac, right? And he's going to be made into multiple nations, that we're going to talk about later on. But then we have one of these other sons, Midian. We don't know the other ones if they blend into other nations, but Midian, he becomes a nation, right? We have Moses' father-in-law is a Midianite. So Moses marries a woman that is from the Midians, right? So it's still an ancestor of Abraham, which we can sometimes forget. Just a pagan people and somewhere there. But no, they were actually descendants from Abraham. Not through the promise of Isaac and Jacob, but still a descendant of Abraham. And then there's some other things that talks about Sheba, that Jokshan begot Sheba. We have another figure that has a same or similar name. We have the Queen of Sheba, right, later on with Solomon. And so is there some connection there? And again, we don't know. All these, as we continue on the verses, these people kind of end up settling in the Arabian Peninsula. They're sent off away from the promised land that was given to Isaac and to his descendants. And traditionally, a lot of times we think that the Queen of Sheba, she was from she was a Cushite. She's from the land of Ethiopia, perhaps. Which that is true that she's identified and associated with Cushite, but Cush is also, some of their descendants were in the Arabian Peninsula as well. So it could have been Sheba is in the Arabian Peninsula. We're not sure. That could be the same Sheba. We don't have any connections for sure that we know. It's just speculation or maybe someone's tradition. But just interesting that those names are in there, and some possible connections that when we get to heaven and we're trying to figure out how all the people groups came to be after who knows how long, that'd be something interesting to find out. Where did these people come from? Or where did they go? Where were their descendants? What people did they become in the time that we live now, that we lived in, right? That we live in now? Like, where did they die off, or did they become assimilated into another people group, or are they? This nation is primarily descendants from the descendants of Zimran or Jokshan or somebody here that we don't really know a lot about. All right, so let's go back. Verse 5. And Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. But Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines which Abraham had. And while he was still living, he sent them eastward away from Isaac his son to the country of the east. So Isaac was still the heir. He's still the son of promise. He gave everything that he had to him, but he still gave gifts to his other sons they're still blessed, but they weren't the child of promise. And they're sent away the east out of this promised land. Verse 7, this is the sum of the years of Abraham's life which he lived, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people, and his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt at Beer-lahai-roi. So Abraham, he lived 175 years. Okay, he lived to be very, very old. And something interesting here in verse 9, his sons Isaac and Ishmael. Remember how Ishmael left? That it was not on good terms, right? He had been making fun of Isaac, but God still had blessings, still promised him and his mother Hagar that Ishmael would survive, that he'd be made into nation himself, that he's blessed, because he's still a descendant of Abraham. He wasn't the primary receiver of the blessings, but being Abraham's descendant, biological descendant, he was still going to have blessings. And so he did. And then we see here that at least at this point they reconciled, right? Ishmael and his half-brother Isaac, right? They both had the same dad, different moms, but they reconciled to bury their dad. Okay? And so we see peace between them, at least at this point. Their descendants would not have peace so much, but here, these half-brothers, they had peace. They come together, they bury their dad. And he's buried in the same place that he purchased, and we had that a few weeks back as well, where Abraham went through the process of purchasing the first plot of land in the promised land, right? He was a sojourner, he's a stranger, he's a wanderer in this land that God had promised to give to his descendants. But he finally purchased land, and it was just for a place to bury Sarah. And now he's buried there as well. All right, verse 12, now we're going to talk about a little bit about Ishmael. Now this is the genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. And these were the names of the sons of Ishmael, by their names according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoth, then Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadar, Timah, Jeter, Naphish, and Kedemah. These were the sons of Ishmael, and these were their names by their towns and their settlements, 12 princes according to their nations. These were the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people. They dwelt from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt, as you go toward Assyria. He died in the presence of all his brethren. So it gives us a overview look of Ishmael. So we're not going through again. We kind of jumped around, but this is the end of the story, right? Because we're not so much concerned with Ishmael and his descendants. Who's the focus on? It's on Isaac. We're not even concerned about Abraham. Once Isaac is born, we're not really concerned about Abraham anymore, right? Because it goes on as, Keturah, and he had other sons, blah, blah, blah. But now the focus is on Isaac. But it still is going to give a summary of what happened to Ishmael, give a summary of what happened to Abraham. And so Ishmael did have these sons, and they became nations. And they're also kind of in the Arabian Peninsula, so east of Egypt as you go towards Assyria. Now it says, verse 19, this is the genealogy of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel the Syrian of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Syrian. Now Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his plea, and Rebekah his wife conceived. But the children struggled together within her, and she said, if all is well, why am I like this? So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. One people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over, so they called his name Esau. Afterward, his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel, so his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game but Rebekah loved Jacob. So now we're talking about this, and we're even fast forward through the life of Isaac. So again, how old was Isaac when his mom died? 37. How old was he when he married Rebekah? 40. So there's 3 years that happen from the death of Sarah to when he gets a bride, right? So between chapters 23 and 24, we have 3 years go by. How old was he when he had his sons? 60 years old. So how long was he married before he had his first kids? 20 years. Okay, again, I think when we do an overview of this, sometimes we forget. We forget that Rebekah was barren. It seems kind of odd that this keeps happening, right? We had Sarah, that she was barren, right? She was supposed to be giving the one that God made a covenant with, Abraham, offspring, right? She's supposed to have a promised son through him, and she was barren, wasn't having children for many years. Then she has one in her old age, okay, at the age of 90, right? And here we have Rebekah, that she also has that same problem. For whatever reason, okay, we know that God is the one who opens and closes the womb, okay? But for whatever reason, these men that are blessed by God, they are chosen out of the nations to be his chosen people and to be the patriarchs of his chosen people, that they have wombs that are closed, that they're not able to have children. It seems for quite a long time, right? Many years for Abraham and Sarah, and then even 20 years for Isaac and Rebekah. It says, verse 21, that Isaac pleaded with the Lord for his wife. So he's supposed to be the one that's made into nations. He's the fulfillment, and he has to pray and plead to God. And so she conceives. But what's going on with this pregnancy? Is it a normal pregnancy? Something's going on. She's like, I don't know. She just feels a baby inside her. It's like really moving around a lot. Like something doesn't seem right. Okay, and what is she told? Yeah, if all is well, why am I like this? So she went to inquire. So she goes to God and asks, and God answers her. It says that 2 nations are in your womb. You have twins. But they're fighting now, right? And they're going to be fighting as they get older. It's going to be 2 nations that keep butting heads. 2 peoples shall be separated from your body. 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Okay, and that's not how it's supposed to go, right? The firstborn, the oldest, is supposed to be the one that gets the double blessings, that has the primary inheritance, and is supposed to carry on the father's lineage. They all do, but he's the one that gets the main blessing. But in God's prophecy, when he tells that to Rebekah, it says it's the older is going to serve the younger. And again, Abraham was going to be made in many nations. And here, even from his son Isaac, there's already going to be 2 nations. So he has Ishmael's made into nations. He has Midian that's going to be made into a nation. And then through Isaac is going to be 2 nations. And so they indeed were twins. Verse 25, and the first came out red. That's where the name Esau and even Edom. Okay? Esau is going to be the father of the Edomites. That's going to be another people that we'll see later on. He came out red and he was hairy. They called his name Esau. So, and he came out, and afterward his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. So his name was Jacob. So Jacob means heel catcher or supplanter or sometimes deceiver. Okay, that's kind of what that name Jacob means. And so verse 27, the boys grew and Esau was a skillful hunter. Okay, so that different mannerisms, different characteristics. Okay, Esau was going out hunting. Okay, he's an outdoors guy. He is a manly man, and it says that Jacob was more mild, and he didn't want to go dwell out in the wilderness, but he stayed in the tents. He stayed close to home. And it says that Isaac, he loved Esau. Why did he love Esau? He loved all the meat, the game that was brought back, all the kill from the hunt. But Rebekah loved Jacob. All right, and so the primary focus of today is going to be on these last verses, verse 29 through 34. So it sets it up. We see all these descendants of Abraham, kind of what happened with them. Now we see Isaac and what happened after 20 years of not being able to have children. Now they have twins, twin boys, and they're very different. And because of this being different, because of Esau loving to hunt and Jacob being home, now we have this situation set up. Verse 29. Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." And Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So Esau went out and had an unsuccessful hunt. He's gone for days, ran out of food, didn't get an animal. And so he comes back and he's starving. Okay, he's hungry. And I don't know, as kids or with children, they'll like, if they're hungry, so I'm starving. I'm like, okay, wait, we're gonna have dinner, and dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. And none of you guys have ever done that, right? Right. That's kind of what Esau is doing here, okay? Because if you're really starving, you're not going to have the energy to say you're starving. Okay, but he was very impatient. He wanted food. I'm sure he was very hungry, but I'm sure somewhere, because Isaac was blessed. He had all the blessings of Abraham. Do you think they had some snack? Right? They probably had something that he could have eaten from his dad Isaac, right? But he wanted his food now. It was already heated up. He didn't want to have to make something. He wanted it now. And so he goes to his brother Jacob, who's making soup. "Give me a bowl of that stew now. Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright." So Jacob's like, and there's probably some conversation. This probably was not the only time that his birthright had come up. Okay, we don't know how much they knew about what God had told to their mom, to Rebekah, about that the older shall serve the younger. She might have kept that to herself. We don't know. But that blessing of being the firstborn had been talked about, and it doesn't seem that Esau was very concerned. I don't think this was just a spur of the moment thing. It's probably been something that he'd brought up previously. And Jacob, he desired that. It's a good thing to desire blessings, right? It's not a bad thing to desire it. And so, give me a bowl of soup. Okay, well, give me your birthright. Would you guys give up your inheritance for a bowl of soup? Okay. Like, okay, I guess I don't want to. I like my inheritance. I'm going to, I'll just make my own soup. I'll spend whatever it takes, 30 minutes, get a fire going, bring it to a boil, put the ingredients, or I'll just have some bread right now. And so right? There had to be something in the tents of their father that they could have eaten. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." And Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" Okay, I think he's being a little dramatic. Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So there's all sorts of things that you can get to, like, should Jacob have done that? His name kind of deceiver, supplanter. It was a fulfillment, part of the fulfillment of the prophecy given to Rebekah. So something like that, God would have given him the blessing somehow, some way. Maybe he shouldn't have gone about it this way, but this is not prescribing. It's not prescriptive of what should happen. This is just, we're looking at what happened. Okay? And so what can we take from this for application for ourselves, for where we're living? Okay, we don't want to be, be a deceiver like Jacob, but we do want to desire good things and blessings. It's a good thing to desire blessings from God, and we want to come about them in a right way. But I think the bigger takeaway is looking at what Esau did. Esau's birthright. That Esau did not actually, he didn't properly, he despised, right? He didn't properly appreciate the blessings of God and the blessings of his father as having the birthright as the firstborn. He despised his birthright. He didn't give it the due attention. He didn't prize it. It wasn't precious enough to him as it should have been. And so, what is that birthright? It could have, to go into the firstborn, the son of promise, it should have been going through him, that he would be the forefather of the people of God. The God's chosen nation would come through him. But that wasn't something that helped him now, right? What was he going to do? He couldn't eat that now. There's something to be said about having delayed gratification, okay? Giving up something in the short term, so that we can have a blessing or have something better further down the road. Right? Can you think of any examples in our own lives with that? Okay. So as a nation, we have that same kind of immediate gratification problem. And we've had that issue for a long time, because that's a common thing of the human condition, of our state, of our fallen natures, that we don't want to wait for a blessing now. Okay, we'd rather have a cheaper blessing now and have a delay, and then wait for a better blessing later, a richer blessing later. And so some examples for our nation, that our nation's leaders have squandered and sold our birthright, and the birthright of the people that come later, is for many generations that our leaders have sold the inheritance of their posterity to attain temporal power. And an example of this, even all the way back during the Civil War with Abraham Lincoln, there could have been some attempts to reconcile the country before going to violence, going to all-out war. But one of the things he did was he used recent immigrants to swell the ranks of the Northern Army, to be the cannon fodder, to give them the numbers that they needed to ultimately defeat the war. And what should have been a brother war was a brother war, but they used a lot of strangers in that war. And so if he had not done that, it would have looked a lot better, probably looked for a peaceful solution instead of decimating half the nation. And that led to a bunch of other problems that we still deal with some of those things today. Another example is just the immigration policies that have been used over the years since even the Civil War. And they haven't been the same policies the whole time. They've actually gotten progressively worse. But using harmful immigration policies that have helped politicians strengthen their electoral hold. They'll get people, let them come in that will vote for them. But at the same time, now they're ensuring their reelection, but ultimately it's going to open the door for the destruction of the people that they were supposed to serve. We had similar things in World War I that pretty unanimous, that historical scholars look at it. There wasn't a true good side or bad side to join in that, but there were some people in power that wanted war because it's good for the economy, and so we joined it, and we had a lot of people die in our nation and other nations, just so some people could have power and some people could gain wealth. And some similar things with World War II, that it was, to get us out of the Great Depression, and a lot of selling of our nation's birthright, squandering things, squandering a later blessing for current, cheaper blessings. And after that, after the war, different financial policies, and even before that, financial policies that would enrich the current ruling class, and even maybe be a boost and helpful for everybody in the short term, but decades down the line would continue to debase the value of the currency, which would later impoverish actual citizens, Americans. And same thing to this day. The immigration policies favor importing the third world instead of encouraging businesses to hire Americans. Cheap labor today leads to Americans being replaced tomorrow. And something interesting, looking at the UN, if you look at what they have on their website, according to the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, if you look at Article 2.3 and 2.4, it says this for what is genocide. It says, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, or imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. This is what is actually happening to American citizens, is we have policies that are doing this, that they're deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction. And so, the iffy thing there is, well, it has to be demonstrated that these policies are intended to do that. Otherwise, there's no doubt the UN would consider what's going on genocide. But if we look at the purpose of a system is what it does, then it doesn't actually matter what somebody's stated intention is. If an action leads to the death of a person every time, it doesn't matter what the intention is if someone continues to perform that action, knowing the outcome. Okay, if I do something I know it's going to lead to someone dying, like, well, I'm trying to make $1, but someone dies every time I do that thing to make $1, then it doesn't really matter what my intention is. It doesn't matter about that dollar. You're doing something that is inherently going to be harmful. And so those are different ways that our nation's leaders have sold our birthright. Taking the quick and easy short-term solution that yields long-term harm, instead of looking for a long-term solution that might be more difficult in the short term. Esau was not looking at the long term of the people that come from him, that he would have a nation that would come from him. So instead, the Edomites being the chosen people of God, it went to Isaac's descendants and ultimately to the Israelites. Okay, he wasn't thinking about that. He's thinking, here and now, I'm hungry, I want food. This birthright is meaningless to me. Right? But and the spiritual blessing, that's even just the physical blessings of being a blessed nation. But this, we look at it on the national level, but this maps out onto our personal lives as well. And like Esau, we want immediate gratification. We want a quick treat now. And so what would you get? If you wanted something that's sweet, you want a treat, what do you guys ask for? You want a piece of candy or something, right? His mom was like, well, I'm making cookies, they'll be ready in an hour. Like, no, I want this now, right? That would be immediate gratification, okay? But what's better? Are you to be as satisfied with having a little piece of candy now, or we'd rather have a homemade cookie in a little bit? Right, your favorite cookie, okay? And even if you think of the longer term, okay, as adults, we know that certain things are healthier. Some things, okay, that processed sugar is not going to be that great if I have a bunch of that, but something that's homemade, from good ingredients, made from scratch, it's going to it'll taste better. It won't have that bad aftertaste in your mouth. And so, a quick treat now, processed store-bought candy is not going to be preferable in the long run to making homemade cookies from scratch. Even though the cookies are healthier, taste better, and are more satisfying than the candy, it's going to take more effort up front. And our sinful nature does not want that. We want something now. That's immaturity. That's sin. Maturity teaches us that home-baked goods are better. Okay, a home-made meal is better than eating out every single meal. Okay, even if it's just going to be the fact that it's going to be a lot cheaper. Even if it was the exact same health level, it's going to be a lot cheaper in the long run to cook your meals at home. But you got to sacrifice in the short term. And we can see that in other areas of our life. Investing in a house is going to be better long-term than renting, but, well, I don't know right now, it seems like pretty expensive renting, but it used to be it's cheaper renting, right? Investing in a house is better long-term than renting, but it takes more work Another example, similar lines, would be buying more expensive or quality furniture. Buying something that's made out of solid wood would be better than getting something from Walmart that is made out of like particle board. It'll fall apart, right? You're hoping that lasts you 5, maybe 10 years, but that's not something that you're going to hand down to your children or to your grandchildren. If it makes that long, they try moving it, it's just going to be to move it to the dumpster, to take to the dump. But more importantly than that even is the spiritual. Okay, this principle also, of course, applies to the spiritual. As Christians, we know that there is an eternal perspective at play in all of these, and all these decisions that we make. Okay, how is that going to impact eternity, the decision that we're making now? So even wise non-Christians, they'll save up for his children and his grandchildren's physical well-being, for inheritance for them, for housing, for furniture, for whatever, for college educations, that parents and grandparents will do that. Non-believers will. And Christians should do this as well, right? It's a good thing to do. Christians should do this as well. But as Christians, we have something else, another level, that we are concerned about the spiritual well-being of us, of our children, and of our grandchildren, and the spiritual truth of God's word. And that's why something like Christian education is important. Okay? Yeah, it takes a lot to homeschool your children. Okay? It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. It'd just be easier to send them to the public school. But even in the best public schools, it's not the same as having a parent being diligent, being able to pray with them, being able to instruct them in scriptures. Okay, that is something that you're not going to see in the short term. The short term, it's going to be way more expensive, way more costly. It's not going to seem worth it. But when children are raised and brought up in the enculturation, the paideia of God, that's going to have spiritual fruit that you might not see in the immediate, right? It's going to be 5, 10 years down the line before you see that, but it's going to go for eternity. Okay? That those souls that moms and dads have invested in raising their children in the truth of Christ, that as a result of that, there's going to be souls in heaven. Okay, that's how heaven is made full. It's not about doing the easy thing in the short term, but it's about doing the hard thing. It's about building relationships, sharing the gospel with people, and being with people, and blessing them, and loving them, and keep pointing them to fix their eyes on Christ. So for us, all those things are applications. We can see that are vote for government officials that aren't going to sell our nation's birthright. Invest in things that are going to last, that we can give to our children and grandchildren physically, whether it's houses or furniture or skills that we do. But the most important thing is spiritual, investing in those around us spiritually, the truths of Christ. Things like coming to church, things like doing family worship, things like Christian education, homeschool. Those are things that require a lot of work up front, but it's going to pay off in the long term, and especially in eternity.